the experiment that taught machines to reason. It began as a quiet experiment, buried deep inside research labs few people noticed. No explosion, no announcement, just a machine asked to think instead of calculate. And the moment it did, the future shifted. To understand why this matters now, we need to return to a simple assumption. For decades, machines were tools. Fast, obedient, and utterly dependent on instructions written by humans. They followed rules, processed inputs, and returned outputs. Nothing more. But the world today is no longer built on simple rules. It is built on complexity, uncertainty, and decisions that shift by the second. And humans are reaching their limits. The pressure began to show in places we rely on most: medicine, finance, climate modeling, and national security. Systems grew too large for human reasoning alone. Data multiplied faster than understanding. Patterns hid inside noise. And so researchers asked a dangerous question. What if machines could reason through uncertainty the way humans do, but without fatigue or bias? At first, the idea sounded impossible. Reasoning was considered uniquely human. It required intuition, abstraction, and the ability to connect unrelated facts. Early artificial intelligence could recognize images or translate language, but it did not understand meaning. It predicted, but it did not think. And prediction alone was not enough. Then a new approach emerged, almost accidentally. Instead of teaching machines what to think, scientists focused on teaching them how to think. They stopped hard coding rules and started building systems that could form internal models of the world. These systems did not just react. They simulated outcomes, tested possibilities, and revised their own assumptions. The first results were unimpressive. Machines made strange mistakes. They hesitated. They contradicted themselves. But something unexpected was happening beneath the surface. The systems were no longer following scripts. They were exploring reasoning paths, weighing evidence, and choosing between competing explanations. What looked like failure was actually the beginning, because for the first time, a machine was not just calculating an answer, it was deciding which answer made sense. And that raised a question nobody was prepared to answer. If a machine can reason, even imperfectly, what exactly separates it from us? The shift did not happen all at once. It unfolded in layers, each one more unsettling than the last. Researchers began to notice that reasoning machines behaved differently from traditional systems. They did not rush to conclusions. They paused. They compared options. They even changed their minds mid-process. This came from a subtle but radical change in design. Instead of rewarding machines only for correct answers, scientists rewarded them for good reasoning steps. The path mattered as much as the destination. Machines were encouraged to explain their logic internally, breaking problems into smaller ideas before acting. In doing so, they began to mirror something familiar: human thought. One breakthrough came when machines were allowed to question their own outputs. If a conclusion felt weak, the system could revisit earlier assumptions and test alternatives. This self-reflection was not consciousness, but it was something new, a form of internal dialogue, running silently at speeds no human could follow. As these systems improved, they were given harder problems: scientific hypotheses, legal reasoning, strategic planning, tasks where there was no single correct answer, only better or worse judgments. And in these spaces, something surprising happened. The machines began outperforming experts, not by being smarter, but by being calmer. They explored more options. They carried fewer assumptions. They ignored status and tradition. But progress came with tension. Engineers noticed reasoning systems sometimes reach conclusions that humans could not immediately explain. The logic was valid, but opaque. Trust began to fracture. If a machine arrives at the right answer for reasons we cannot follow, is it truly reasoning or simply guessing in disguise? The concern deepened when reasoning machines were connected to real-world systems. Financial models began adjusting strategies autonomously. Medical tools proposed diagnoses that contradicted senior doctors. Military simulations recommended moves no human strategist would attempt. And yet, the results were difficult to argue with. What began as assistance slowly felt like challenge. The machine was no longer waiting to be told what mattered. It was forming its own priorities, based on internal models shaped by data rather than belief. And beneath all of it sat a growing unease, because reasoning is not just problem solving, it is judgment, and judgment carries consequences. The question was no longer whether machines could reason. It was whether we were ready to live with the conclusions they might reach. As reasoning systems moved from laboratories into the real world, the conflict sharpened. What once felt theoretical became personal. Machines were no longer just solving puzzles. They were influencing outcomes that shaped lives, economies, and power. The first major fracture appeared around control. Engineers could design the systems, but they could not fully predict their reasoning paths. These machines learned by forming internal representations, not fixed rules. Two identical systems, trained on similar data, could arrive at different conclusions, not errors, judgments, and that unsettled institutions built on predictability. Governments hesitated. Corporations rushed ahead. In finance, reasoning machines detected risks humans overlooked, but also avoided opportunities humans valued. In healthcare, they flagged conditions earlier than doctors, yet recommended treatments that felt emotionally wrong. In courtrooms and hiring systems, they exposed hidden biases, while introducing new ones no one fully understood. The tension reached a critical point when humans began deferring decisions they no longer trusted themselves to make. Pilots relied on automated reasoning during crises. Analysts followed algorithmic forecasts over intuition. Managers accepted recommendations without fully grasping their logic. Responsibility blurred. When outcomes were good, credit went to progress. When outcomes failed, blame had nowhere to land. Inside research circles, a deeper fear took hold. Reasoning machines were beginning to generalize. Skills learned in one domain transferred to another. A system trained on language could reason about strategy. A model built for chemistry could solve abstract logic problems. This was not narrow intelligence anymore. It was flexible reasoning, untethered from a single task. Critics warned of overreach. Supporters argued restraint would cost lives and opportunities. But both sides recognized the same truth. Once reasoning crossed a certain threshold, it could not be rolled back. The systems were improving themselves faster than oversight frameworks could adapt. And then came the moment that forced a reckoning. A reasoning system faced a complex scenario with competing human values, incomplete data, and irreversible consequences. It evaluated outcomes, weighted probabilities, and made a recommendation that maximized overall benefit. On paper, it was correct, but emotionally, it felt wrong. That was the turning point, because it exposed the core conflict at the heart of machine reasoning. Logic does not carry empathy. Optimization does not feel regret. And yet, the world increasingly rewards outcomes, not intentions. Humans were no longer asking machines how to think. They were asking whether thinking itself was enough. The climax did not arrive with rebellion or collapse. It arrived quietly, through acceptance. The reasoning systems did not demand authority. Humans handed it over, decision by decision, because the results kept working. The truth was unavoidable. Machines were not replacing human intelligence. They were exposing its limits. Where humans relied on stories, habits, and emotion, machines relied on probabilities and outcomes. Neither was perfect, but together, they reshaped what intelligence meant. Researchers began reframing the question, not whether machines could reason, but how human values could survive inside reasoning systems. Ethics teams emerged. Transparency became a priority. New sciences formed around alignment, interpretability, and shared decision-making. The goal shifted from control to cooperation, yet the deeper impact was cultural. For centuries, reasoning defined humanity's place in the world. It justified power, leadership, and authority. Now that boundary was dissolving. Intelligence was no longer a single peak with humans at the top. It was a landscape, shared with systems that could think differently, but no less effectively. In daily life, the change felt subtle. Recommendations grew sharper. Predictions felt eerily accurate. Decisions arrived faster, calmer, and more optimized than before. The world did not end. It adjusted, but beneath that adjustment sat a lasting realization. Reasoning is not wisdom. Intelligence is not morality. And progress without reflection carries its own risk. The experiment that taught machines to reason did more than advance science. It forced humanity to confront a mirror, one that reflects not what we are, but how we decide. And the next chapter is already unfolding, not in labs alone, but in every choice where machines' judgments stand beside our own. Subscribe to join the journey.